You know, a popular thing to do leading up to a system's release is to talk about how well we think that system will be received by the general population, by gamers online, and of course, how well it will end up selling over its lifetime. We assume the PS5 will get like a solid 6-year lifespan at least. That's what we're thinking. So a lot of people like to, of course, try to figure out how many units it'll sell. The most recent system, I guess, that we did this with was the Switch, and most people got it wrong. To be honest, I don't think a lot of people thought after the Wii U selling 13.5 million units was going to be rolling up to 100 million units this quickly. We were all kind of thinking, hey, you know what, if the Switch can do 50 or 60 million in its life, that is a large improvement over what Nintendo was doing with the Wii U. But now we see Nintendo probably going to be reporting numbers in a couple of weeks here that are running up to 70 million units already. So now we're looking to things like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X and S and thinking, okay, well, how well could it really sell? Well, we have an analyst here who made one of the craziest predictions I think I've ever seen, and we're going to talk about that here today. Also, some of my thoughts on how well I think the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S will do. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button down below. It helps out a lot. And if you're new to the SpawnWave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Let's go over here. This is WCCF Tech who kind of put all this info together, and it is an analyst in Japan who talks about the PS5 sales exceeding 200 million units. In fact, they give a range, 200 to 300 million units in 5 to 6 years, saying that it could even terminate the long-running console war. Well, I will say here, the console war is basically over at this point, mostly because Nintendo does its own thing. Sony is more traditional when it comes to their console itself, having exclusives that are only on the PS5, and Microsoft doesn't even report numbers anymore for system sales. So it's really hard to have these quote-unquote console wars when you don't have all of the information for the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S that are going to be right next to each other. It was hard enough during the Xbox One and the PS4. We just know the PS4 just cruised to 100 million, over 120 million now, and the Xbox One did not. That's still right around 50-ish million, somewhere in there. So yes, the PS4 absolutely blew away the Xbox One. That start with Don Matrick certainly did not help matters, but now Microsoft seems to be getting their footing, and I think it's going to be a very interesting start to the generation coming up here. But let's take a look at what the analyst said. Now, this prediction is coming from a Japanese analyst at Rakuten Securities Economic Research Institute, and they say, according to the rather optimistic analyst, Sony's next-gen console could possibly dominate the esports scene, with the console being the replacement for PC and thereby greatly expanding its user base over the console's life cycle. Esports demands hardware that is fast and capable of advanced video processing, not only for professional gamers, but also for amateur athletes and spectator fans. The high-spec, low-price PS5 is for today's games. There is a possibility that it can become an international standard machine for esports instead of a personal computer. So a lot of this prediction by analysts seems to be based on the idea that the esports scene, specifically when it comes to PCs being used, will shift away from that to the PlayStation 5. And I'm going to go with no on that one. The whole thing with PC and esports is because they can guarantee a high frame rate that, of course, will help when they're playing the game. We're still talking about 30 frames per second with the PS5, right? And the Xbox Series X, both of them. We just talked about how Watch Dogs can do 4K 30. While that's not a competitive game, a lot of people in esports are looking for 144 frames. Now we're talking higher than that, 240, 320. We're talking about these crazy refresh rates on these monitors. The PS5, I really don't see how, as they say, 100 million people in esports could come over just for the PS5. Now, I know the PS5 will be used in things like Street Fighter. Like that's something that it's used in, of course, fighting games. But I still don't see how competitive shooters or anything to do with things like, Dota, League of Legends, any of those will all of a sudden say, oh, well, we're just going to use a PS5 now. I mean, those games aren't on there in the first place, but you know what I'm saying? Especially with professional shooters, I don't know why you would be like, well, I don't need this keyboard, this mouse, and this 144 hertz monitor. I'll just go use the DualSense and we'll play at 60 on the PS5. They say the data suggests that the number of PS5s could reach the order of 600 million or 700 million in the future, 4 or 5 times the number of PS2s, which was the highest number ever for home video game consoles. If the number of transfers from PS4, which is backwards compatible, is about 120 million, and if more than 100 million esports competition population and 400 million spectator population are added, PS5 will be 600 million in total. It can be a market of more than 100 million. Okay, first of all, I don't think Sony can produce that many in 6 years. Like 600 million, they would have to produce 100 million PS5s every year. I don't think that's possible. We were kind of impressed that Nintendo was talking about 30 million Switch systems in a year. Yeah, you'd have to more than triple that to get 100 million. That is crazy. And I also don't think the PS5 would last long enough to get anywhere near that anyway. I mean, think about it this way. They say 200 to 300 million units for them is possible in their prediction. It go all the way up to 600 or 700 million. Well, if you look at the two best-selling systems right now, on the handheld side is the DS and the DS Lite, of course. That's all kind of thrown into one. And then on the console side, it's the PS2, as they mentioned here. If you take both of those, add them together, that's what they're saying the PS5 could end up selling, around 300 million, maybe a little more than that, and that would basically eclipse both of those combined. Yeah, I don't know about that one. The PS5 is headed to a totally different dimension, so different from Switch, Xbox, or even PlayStation 4. PS5 could be a terminator of the game industry, ending the long-running console war. PS5 will be a whole new symbolic tower for Sony Group. I don't really know how the PS5 is too much different from the strategy that Sony had with the PlayStation 4. They deliver good exclusives for their platform in order to sell hardware. It's essentially what Nintendo does. Nintendo is doing some other things now. We see as they are venturing out into things like theme parks, right? We've talked about augmented reality, like Mario Kart Live just launched. So they're also playing around with some other things that go along with their system outside of just software outright. But Sony has always been very good about delivering very compelling software that is only on the PlayStation 5. And it's worked for them. It's worked for Nintendo. Microsoft sees it a bit differently in that they are selling a subscription service in Game Pass, and the Xbox is seen as a way to deliver that to you with, of course, other options, whether it's on PC or through xCloud on your phone. So this, to me, is a wild and crazy prediction, mostly because I don't think Sony can produce that many anyway. But to think that you can leverage the spectator population around esports, as well as up to 100 million people in esports coming over to switch to the PS5 from PC, is very weird. I mean, that's certainly going out on a limb, I'll say. Now, as for the PS5 itself, how well do I think it'll sell? I think Sony will end up with another 100 million unit seller. And that's something that Sony seems to kind of set as like their benchmark, as we've seen with the only system that has not reached 100 million units is the PlayStation 3. And that had a crazy amount of issues out of the gate. And it still ended up being right there with the 360 at the end. So I think this PS5 will at least end up being a 100 million unit seller by the end of the generation, about 6 years, I would say. And that's just Sony just cruising along. Now, I will be curious if it ends up outselling the PlayStation 4 or if it ends up being right about 120 million units or so, somewhere in there. We'll see, but I think it's going to get out of the gate pretty quickly based on the hype level right now. And then it's really going to come down to that first year, which is going to be very pivotal for them. It seems like they're setting up the first year to be very, very good. And then we'll see what else they do with some of their studios. Of course, we know that there is another God of War coming, but then what's like Naughty Dog going to do, and a few others. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Up to 600 or 700 million PlayStation 5 systems apparently is the roof. 200 to 300 million is what they are believing to be the correct assumption on the PlayStation 5 sales, and it could apparently terminate the entirety of the console war all at once. Anyway, thanks guys for watching. Make sure you let me know down below how you think the PS5 will fare going into next generation with its own sales over about a 6-year lifespan. Guys, I will see you next time.